My boss, Thorne, didn't even wait for the conference room door to close before he snapped at me. "A raise! You don't deserve a damn penny more, Marlo." He said it loud enough that the entire team on the other side of the glass wall froze mid-keyboard click. I felt heat rise up my neck, not from shame, but from the way he smirked at me, like he genuinely enjoyed saying it. My printed sales report, my carefully prepared report, was still in his hand, folded carelessly like garbage he was about to throw away. His thumb tapped the conference table impatiently, the same way someone might tap a dog bowl to get attention. "People like you should be grateful you're even here," he added, his voice dripping with condescension. I stood there in that glass box, visible to everyone, feeling their eyes on me. My pulse hammered so loudly I could barely hear the air vent buzzing above us. He didn't even look at the numbers I'd spent hours compiling. He didn't see the months I'd worked through splitting migraines, late nights, and lost weekends. He just pushed the papers back toward me without even opening them. I swallowed the urge to fire back at him right there. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the rejected report, the paper crinkling in my tight grip. He laughed under his breath, a sound that made my stomach turn. I could see my coworkers through the glass, quickly averting their eyes when I looked their way. The shame wasn't mine to carry, but it settled on my shoulders anyway. I walked out of that conference room with my head held high, even though inside I was crumbling. That was the exact moment I knew with absolute certainty. When he finally did read those numbers, when he was forced to actually look at what I'd accomplished, everything would change. Everything would break wide open. He thought he could dismiss me with a wave of his hand and a few cruel words. He thought I was just another quiet employee who would accept whatever scraps he threw my way. But he had no idea what I'd done last quarter. He had no idea what those numbers actually said. And that ignorance was going to cost him everything. My name is Marlo Halston. I'm 27 years old, and at the time this all happened, I was the quiet workhorse of Ridgemont Office Supplies sales department. I was the one who kept things running smoothly while louder people took all the bows and collected all the praise. I wasn't dramatic by nature. I wasn't confrontational. I genuinely believed that hard work eventually spoke for itself, that merit would be recognized without me having to demand it. But that morning, standing under those harsh fluorescent lights that hummed like they pitied me, I realized I'd been playing the wrong game entirely. I'd been working in a system that rewarded volume over value, visibility over substance. I needed that raise desperately. My younger sister was in her second year of college, and our parents couldn't help her financially. I'd been covering her tuition, her books, her housing. Every month, I watched my bank account drain to almost nothing. I wasn't asking for extra money to buy luxuries. I was asking for what I'd earned so I could keep my sister in school. Thorne hadn't always treated me like this. It started 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon when everything shifted. I was at my desk, headphones in, working through a client proposal when I heard his voice carrying from his office. The door was half open, and he was on the phone, speaking loudly enough that I caught every word even through my music. "Kaylan's going to inherit this department," he said proudly, like a father talking about his golden child. "The kid's got instincts, natural talent. He's exactly what we need moving forward." My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Kaylan had been with the company for 8 months. I'd been there for 3 years, consistently hitting targets, quietly exceeding expectations. But Thorne had decided his protege deserved the future I'd been working toward. That conversation changed everything for me. It made me realize that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how many late nights I put in, Thorne had already made his choice. And that choice wasn't me. It would never be me. Not because of my performance, but because I didn't fit whatever image he had in his mind. 2 weeks after that overheard conversation, I built an entire client pitch deck from scratch. I spent days researching the prospect, analyzing their pain points, crafting solutions that would genuinely help their business. I poured everything I knew into that presentation. The morning before the client meeting, I emailed the complete deck to Thorne, as required by our internal process. He thanked me briefly in a reply, saying he'd review it. The next day, I watched through the conference room glass as Thorne presented my work word for word to the client. Kaylan sat beside him, nodding along like he'd contributed something meaningful. When they emerged from the meeting, Thorne was grinning. "Great work, Kaylan," he said loudly, clapping him on the shoulder. "That approach with the quarterly projections was brilliant." Those were my projections, My research, my words. I felt invisible, like I was watching my own work being stolen in real time, and there was nothing I could do about it. But then something unexpected happened. 3 days later, the client emailed me directly, thanking me for the thorough proposal. My name had been on the original document metadata. They knew who'd actually done the work. The client chose our proposal, but more importantly, they specifically requested to work with me on implementation, not Thorn. That email came directly to my inbox, copying Thorn almost as an afterthought. "We were impressed by Marlowe's understanding of our needs," the client wrote. "We'd like her as the primary contact moving forward." I watched Thorn's jaw tighten when he read it, but he couldn't say no without looking petty. So he agreed, probably assuming he could still take credit later. That's when my numbers started climbing, really climbing. I decided to say nothing about it yet. I would do the work quietly, build the results, and let the data speak when the time was right. Strategic silence became my weapon. While Thorn was busy grooming Kalen and taking credit for team wins, I was building something he couldn't see. Client after client, I delivered results. I stayed late, refined my approach, and focused on genuine relationship building rather than quick wins. My commission checks grew larger each month. I saved every email, every positive client response, every documented success. I was building a case without anyone knowing it existed. About a month after that first big client win, something happened that showed me exactly what I was dealing with. I'd spent a week working on a comprehensive sales report analyzing our department's performance. It included detailed breakdowns, trend analyses, and strategic recommendations. I saved it on our shared drive, clearly labeled with my name and the date. The next morning, I came in to find the file completely gone. Not in trash, not moved, deleted. When I asked Kalen about it, since he was the only other person who'd accessed that folder recently, he shrugged with fake concern. "I might have accidentally deleted something while cleaning up files," he said. "Sorry, can you just redo it?" Just redo it. A week's worth of work. Thorn, standing nearby, overheard the exchange. "These things happen, Marlowe," he said dismissively. "You should keep better backups." He didn't even consider that it might have been deliberate, or maybe he did and simply didn't care. But what neither of them knew was that I had kept backups, multiple backups, and those backups had timestamps proving I'd created everything, showing the exact dates and times of my work. I quietly recovered the file and continued as if nothing had happened. But I filed that incident away in my memory, adding it to the growing list. That's when I decided to visit HR. I needed to document what was happening, to create an official record before things got worse. I scheduled a meeting with the HR representative, a woman named Paxton who seemed friendly enough in company emails. I laid out the situation carefully, not emotionally, just factually. The missing files, the uncredited work, the pattern of being overlooked while Kalen received praise for things he didn't do. Paxton listened, nodding sympathetically. But when I finished, her response made my heart sink. "Thorn's been with the company for 15 years, she said carefully. "He has a lot of influence here. I'm not saying you're wrong, Marlowe, but you need to choose your battles carefully. Sometimes it's better to just keep your head down and do good work." In other words, HR wasn't going to help me. They were more afraid of Thorn than interested in justice. I walked out of that office with a new resolve burning in my chest. If the system wouldn't protect me, I'd have to protect myself. I would document everything, build an undeniable case, and wait for the right moment to present it. Not to HR. To someone who actually had the power to do something about it. A few days after the HR meeting, I was eating lunch alone in the break room when 2 coworkers sat down at the table next to mine. They didn't realize I was there, hidden behind the open door of the supply cabinet. "Did you hear what Thorn said in the leadership meeting?" one of them whispered. "He called Marlowe replaceable. Said she's competent but nothing special." Replaceable. The word hit me like a physical blow. After 3 years of dedication, of covering for others, of staying late and coming in early, I was replaceable to him. But as I sat there, hidden behind that cabinet door, something shifted inside me. If he thought I was replaceable, then he truly had no idea what I was accomplishing. He wasn't paying attention to the actual numbers, only to his predetermined narrative. And that blindness was going to be his downfall. I finished my lunch slowly, letting that word echo in my mind. Replaceable. Fine, let him think that. Let him stay comfortable in his ignorance while I continued building something he couldn't ignore. When the truth finally came out, that word would haunt him. That night marked a turning point. While everyone else left the office at 5 o'clock sharp, I stayed late. I pulled up our stagnant client list, accounts that hadn't placed orders in months, relationships that had gone cold under previous management. These were clients that everyone else had written off as lost causes. I spent the evening carefully crafting personalized outreach emails, referencing past orders, acknowledging the gap in communication, and offering genuine solutions to their current challenges. I wasn't using templates or generic sales pitches. I was treating each client like they actually mattered, because they did. Over the next several weeks, I did this every night. While Thorne left at 4:30 to play golf and Kaylin rushed out at 5 to meet friends, I stayed. I rebuilt relationships. I turned cold leads into warm conversations into proposals, proposals into orders. This is where I outperformed the entire department. Silently, steadily. While everyone else was focused on the easy wins and the visible projects, I was resurrecting revenue streams they didn't even remember existed. My sales numbers didn't just increase. They exploded. And Thorne never noticed because he was too busy mentoring his golden boy to actually look at the data. The numbers started shifting dramatically in my favor. My sales spiked in January. Then they spiked again in February. By March, I'd broken the department's quarterly record, a record that had stood for 6 years. My commission check that month was more than double any I'd received before. But the most beautiful part was that Thorne genuinely didn't notice. He was so focused on giving Kaylin credit for every small win, so invested in his chosen narrative, that he never looked at the actual performance reports, until accounting sent out the quarterly breakdown. It was a routine email that went to all department heads and their direct reports, showing each salesperson's numbers side by side. I was copied on it because of my standing in the department. I watched my inbox, waiting to see if Thorne would react. The email arrived at 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday. By 10:15, I still hadn't heard anything from him. But when I walked past his office, I saw him staring at his computer screen, his brow furrowed deeply, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. Our eyes met briefly through the glass. He minimized the window quickly and looked away, brushing past me in the hallway without a word. But I'd seen that look. That was the moment he realized something was very wrong with his assumptions. For the next few days, Thorne was different, quieter. He watched me more carefully, like he was trying to figure something out. I caught him looking at his screen several times, clearly reviewing numbers, his expression growing more troubled each time. Kaylin seemed to sense the shift too. He started avoiding me, taking different paths through the office to stay out of my way. The dynamic had changed, though nobody was acknowledging it openly. Then one afternoon, Thorne stopped by my desk. "I'd like to review your quarterly results," he said stiffly. "Let's schedule a meeting." This was unusual. He'd never requested a review meeting with me before. Usually he just glanced at reports during team meetings and moved on. "Of course," I said calmly. "When works for you?" "Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock. He walked away before I could respond. I knew what this meant. He'd finally looked at the numbers, really looked at them. And now he was trying to figure out how to handle a situation that didn't fit his preferred narrative. This was my chance. I spent the next 2 days preparing a comprehensive report that documented everything, every client win, every resurrected account, every strategy that had worked. I would hand him undeniable proof of my value. When Friday came, I arrived at the conference room at exactly 3 o'clock, my report printed and organized in a clean folder. Thorne was already there, sitting at the head of the table. Kaylin was there too, which surprised me. This was supposed to be a review of my performance, but apparently Thorne wanted his protege present. "Have a seat," Thorne said, gesturing vaguely. His tone was clipped, professional, but there was something underneath it. Tension, maybe even worry. I sat down and slid the folder across the table toward him. "I've prepared a detailed breakdown of my quarterly performance," I said calmly, "including client acquisition rates, revenue growth, and projected Q2 numbers based on current pipeline." He glanced at the folder but didn't open it immediately. "Before we get into that," he said, "I wanted to discuss your compensation request from last month." My heart started beating faster, so this was about the raise I'd asked for. The one he'd dismissed immediately without even considering it. "I'm listening," I said. His response would set the tone for everything that followed. "Let's be realistic about your role here," he began, And I knew right then he was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. What I didn't know until later was what had happened just before this meeting. Vesper, a coworker I'd helped train the previous year, pulled me aside weeks later and told me the truth. Apparently, Thorn had called Kaylin into his office 30 minutes before my meeting. Vesper's desk was right outside Thorn's office, and she'd heard the entire conversation through the thin walls. "She's going to come in emotional," Thorn had told Kaylin. "Probably with complaints about recognition or whatever. Shut her down quickly. Don't let her talk numbers. Keep the conversation focused on her attitude and team dynamics." They had planned this. They had strategized how to dismiss me before I even walked into that room. Thorn had looked at my numbers, seen that they were good, maybe too good, and instead of acknowledging my performance, he decided to undermine me, to make sure I stayed quiet and grateful for whatever scraps they offered. If I'd known this at the time, maybe I would have walked out. Maybe I would have confronted him differently, but I didn't know. So I sat there and let him talk, my folder unopened on the table between us, while he told me exactly what he thought I was worth. "You don't deserve a damn penny more, Marlo." Those were his exact words, spoken loudly enough that everyone outside could hear. "People like you should be grateful you're even here." I felt the humiliation wash over me, but underneath it was something stronger. Clarity, absolute clarity. He hadn't read my report. He'd seen the numbers in accounting's email, felt threatened by them, and decided to put me in my place before I could use them as leverage. This wasn't about my performance. It was about control, about maintaining his narrative that Kaylin was the star and I was just adequate. I picked up my folder slowly, the report he'd never bothered to open. "I understand," I said quietly. His eyebrows raised slightly, like he'd expected more of a fight. "Good, then we're done here." I walked out of that conference room with everyone watching. I didn't look at their faces. I didn't acknowledge the pity or the discomfort in their expressions. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and did something I'd been planning for weeks. I left that report on the table deliberately. Let him read it or not. It didn't matter anymore. I had a different plan now. That evening, I noticed an email from the VP of Sales, Wesley, sent to all department heads. It was a routine request. "Please submit updated department metrics for the annual review by end of week." This was standard procedure. Usually, Thorn would compile the team's numbers, add his commentary, and submit everything as a package. But this year, I decided to do something different. I sent my quarterly report, complete, unedited with every detail of my performance, directly to Wesley. Not as a complaint, not as an accusation, just as a response to his request for metrics. I included my client list, my revenue numbers, my conversion rates, my year-over-year growth. All facts, no emotion, no commentary about Thorn or Kaylin, just my work documented and quantified. I hit send at 7:43 p.m. on a Sunday night, when I knew Thorn wouldn't be checking his email. By the time he realized what I'd done, it would be too late to intercept it. This was my move. Quiet, strategic, undeniable. I wasn't going to play politics or make accusations. I was going to let the numbers tell the story that Thorn had refused to hear. And once those numbers reached someone who actually cared about results over favoritism, everything would change. Monday morning came fast. I arrived at the office early, as usual, and settled into my routine. At 9:23 a.m., my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Thorn, marked urgent. "Do not send reports directly to upper management without running them through me first. This is a clear violation of department protocol. See me immediately." My hands were steady as I read it. He'd found out. Probably Wesley's assistant had copied him on something, or maybe Wesley had forwarded my report asking for context. Either way, Thorn knew what I'd done and he was panicking. I walked to his office slowly. He was standing by his desk, his face red, his jaw tight. "What exactly did you think you were doing?" he demanded. "Wesley requested department metrics," I said calmly. "I provided mine. Was I not supposed to respond to a direct request from the VP? You're supposed to go through proper channels, through me." "I did go through you," I reminded him. "I gave you that same report on Friday. You chose not to read it." His mouth opened and closed. He couldn't argue with that without admitting he dismissed my work without even looking at it. "Don't do it again," he finally said. "Understood." I left his office, but we both knew the damage was done. My report was already in Wesley's hands. That afternoon, Vesper approached my desk hesitantly. We'd always been friendly, but she usually kept her distance from office drama. "Can I talk to you?" she asked quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. We stepped into the stairwell, away from curious eyes and ears. "I probably shouldn't tell you this," she began, "but I thought you should know. Upper management is reviewing a departmental restructuring. They're looking at performance distribution. Trying to figure out why our department's numbers are good but not great. They're asking questions." My heart started racing. What kind of questions? About who's actually bringing in the revenue, about whether leadership is properly allocating resources and recognition. Thorne's position isn't as secure as he acts. She looked genuinely worried for me. "I don't know what you did, Marlo, but people are noticing. The right people." I thanked her and went back to my desk, my mind spinning. This was bigger than I'd realized. This wasn't just about my raise anymore. This was about the entire department's structure. And if upper management was really looking at individual performance, Thorne's carefully constructed narrative was about to crumble. All I had to do was wait, and keep doing exactly what I'd been doing. 2 weeks later, an email appeared in everyone's inbox. The company was opening a confidential internal system for employees to submit contribution summaries for the restructuring review. It was anonymous, supposedly, though I suspected HR could trace submissions if they really wanted to. The email emphasized that this was an opportunity to ensure accurate representation of individual contributions to departmental success. This was it. This was my moment. I spent an entire evening crafting my submission. I didn't make accusations. I didn't complain about Thorne or Kaylin. I simply documented everything, every client I'd brought in, every account I'd resurrected, every strategy I'd developed. I included dates, revenue numbers, email trails showing client relationships. I attached copies of client feedback that specifically mentioned my name. I provided a complete picture of my contributions to the department's success over the past year. It was detailed. It was factual. It was devastating in its clarity. I submitted it at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday night. Then I closed my laptop and went to bed, knowing that I'd done everything I could. The rest was out of my hands. Truth had a way of rising to the surface, especially when someone finally bothered to look for it. Friday morning, my phone buzzed during my commute, a calendar invitation, from Wesley, the VP of Sales. "Performance review meeting Marlo Halston." Monday, 10 a.m., just me. No mention of Thorne, no mention of the team, just me and the VP of Sales. My stomach dropped. This was either very good or very bad. There was no middle ground here. When I arrived at the office, I noticed Thorne wasn't at his desk, unusual for a Friday morning. I later learned he'd been called into an emergency meeting with Wesley at 8 a.m. He emerged 90 minutes later looking shaken, his usually confident stride reduced to something more uncertain. He didn't look at me as he passed my desk. Didn't say anything. Just went straight to his office and closed the door. Kaylin showed up late, which was also unusual. When he did arrive, he and Thorne had a brief, tense conversation in the conference room. Through the glass, I could see Thorne's animated gestures, his obvious stress. Kaylin looked confused and worried. Something was happening. The pieces were moving, and I was at the center of it whether I wanted to be or not. That weekend felt endless. I rehearsed what I might say to Wesley, how I might present myself. Professional, factual, not bitter. I would tell the truth and let him decide what to do with it. Monday morning, Thorne cornered me before I could even sit down at my desk. His demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the dismissive arrogance. In its place was something almost friendly, almost desperate. "Marlo," he said, his voice unnaturally warm. "Got a minute?" We stepped into an empty conference room. He closed the door carefully. "Listen, I know we've had some miscommunications lately," he began. "I wanted to clear the air before your meeting with Wesley." Now I understood. He knew about the meeting, and he was scared. "I appreciate that," I said neutrally, giving him nothing. "Did you mention anything specific in your contribution summary, anything about department dynamics?" There it was. He wanted to know what I'd said, what evidence I'd provided. He was trying to get ahead of whatever damage I might have done. I smiled slightly. "I documented my work, that's all, just facts and numbers." "Right, facts and numbers." He nodded, but his jaw was tight. "That's good, that's professional." He looked like he wanted to say more, like he wanted to warn me or threaten me or somehow control the narrative. But he couldn't. Not anymore. The truth was already out there in my submission, in my report to Wesley, in the data that couldn't be manipulated or dismissed. He left the conference room quickly, pulling out his phone to call someone, probably Kaylan. Now they both knew they were in trouble. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked into Wesley's office. It was my first time meeting him face to face. He was in his 50s, gray hair, sharp eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. "Marlo, thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I've been reviewing your performance over the past year. Very impressive numbers." "Thank you," I said simply. "Can you walk me through your process, specifically with the dormant accounts you reactivated?" That's a significant revenue stream that wasn't on anyone's radar. So I did. I explained my strategy, the late nights, the personalized outreach, the relationship building that others had dismissed as too time-consuming. I showed him the progression from cold leads to active clients. I presented everything calmly, professionally, without any hint of bitterness about how my work had been overlooked. Wesley listened carefully, taking notes. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "You've been carrying this department," he said bluntly. "Your numbers represent 48% of our total quarterly revenue. Nearly half, did you know that?" I hadn't known the exact percentage, but it didn't surprise me. "I just focused on doing the work," I said. "That's evident." He paused. "I'm requesting the full department's performance data for comparison. I want to understand the complete picture here. You'll be hearing from me again soon." 2 days later, a mandatory department meeting was called. Everyone crammed into the main conference room, murmuring nervously. Nobody knew what this was about, but the tension was obvious. Wesley stood at the front of the room. Thorne sat off to the side, looking relaxed at first, confident. He probably assumed this was routine, that his position was secure, that whatever concerns had been raised had been smoothed over. Then Wesley pulled up a presentation on the screen. "I want to review our quarterly performance," he began. The first slide showed our department's total revenue, impressive numbers. Thorne started to smile. The second slide broke down individual contributions. My name was at the top. By a staggering margin, 48% of total revenue. The next highest performer was at 17%. Kaylan was at 9%. The room went completely silent. People stared at the screen, then at me, then at Thorne. "Thorne," Wesley said calmly, "can you explain this discrepancy? How is one team member generating nearly half the department's revenue while receiving no recognition or advancement?" Thorne's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at Wesley. He had no answer, because there was no answer that didn't expose his complete failure as a leader. Kaylan, sitting near the front, avoided looking at anyone. The golden boy suddenly looked very small. Fallout was swift. By the end of that week, Thorne was removed from all major projects pending a complete review of his management practices. The department restructuring moved forward, but with a very different focus than Thorne had anticipated. And I received a call from Wesley on Friday afternoon. "Marlo, I'd like to offer you interim leadership of the sales department while we complete our review," he said. "This isn't a pity promotion. It's based purely on merit and performance. You've proven you can generate results. Now I want to see if you can help others do the same." Interim leadership. Not because someone felt sorry for me, not because I'd complained loud enough, but because I'd done the work. Because the numbers didn't lie, no matter how much Thorne had wanted them to. I accepted. The following Monday, I walked into the office to find my coworkers looking at me with something I'd never seen before: respect. Not fear, not pity, genuine respect. Vesper was the first to congratulate me. "You didn't have to destroy him," she said quietly. "You just had to show the truth." She was right. I hadn't exposed Thorne through gossip or political maneuvering. I'd simply done exceptional work and made sure the right people saw it. Sometimes that's the most powerful move of all. 3 months later, my interim title became permanent. I was officially the department lead for sales. My raise wasn't just the modest increase I'd originally requested. It was triple that amount. I got my own office, a real office with a door and a window, not a desk in the corner. I hired 2 assistants to help manage the growing workload. One of them was Vesper, who'd proven her loyalty and competence. Thorne's position remained under evaluation. He wasn't fired, which surprised some people, but I understood the decision. The company didn't want the liability of a wrongful termination lawsuit. Instead, he was reassigned to a role with no direct reports, no real authority. He became a specialist consultant, essentially demoted to doing the work he'd claimed others weren't good enough to do. I saw him in the halls sometimes. He never spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. The man who'd once called me replaceable now worked in a building where my decisions shaped department policy. And Kalen, he actually turned out to be a decent salesman when he had to rely on his own work instead of riding Thorne's favoritism. He apologized to me privately one afternoon, admitting he'd known what was happening and hadn't spoken up. I accepted his apology, not because I forgot, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. The real victory wasn't in Thorne's downfall. It was in the moment I stopped waiting for someone to recognize my worth and started documenting it myself. Know your worth. Work quietly, but never let anyone else decide your value. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting the truth speak louder than any accusation ever could. And the truth always wins in the end.